Welcome back, and welcome to my lecture on Euripides' Medea. Before we talk about Medea, it would be great for you to know the backstory, which is mainly the backstory of the hero Jason. So, for the next few minutes, I want you to apply the hero pattern to the story I'm going to tell you about the life and times of Jason of Iolcus. I hope you enjoy. Jason is from Iolcus in northern Greece, and would have been king when his father died, but his evil uncle Peleus deposed his father instead and put him in prison. When Jason was born, his mother pretended that he was stillborn so that they could sneak out of the palace without trouble. And he ended up getting raised by a centaur named Chiron. Remember him? He's the same guy who served as a tutor to Achilles. One day he decided it was time to return home, and along the way he met an old woman who asked him to carry her across the stream. Now, he's in a hurry, but does it anyway. While crossing the stream, he loses a sandal. However, the old woman turned out to be Hera. It turns out that he was actually passing a test. Back then, the ancients believed that the gods were hiding behind every bush, ready to test you on how good a believer you were. When he finally returned to Iolcus, his evil uncle was quite upset to see him because he had just heard a prophecy saying, "Beware the man who wears one sandal." So in order to get rid of Jason, his evil uncle sent him on a quest to get the Golden Fleece. With the help of Hera and Athena, a ship named Argo was built for him. He filled out the crew of this ship with heroes such as Heracles and headed out in search of the Golden Fleece. And he had to travel far for this. He had to travel all the way from Iolcus, which is over here in northern Greece, to Colchis, yes it rhymes, which is on the far end of the Black Sea. Once he got to the place Colchis, where the Golden Fleece is kept, he had to perform a number of labors for the local king Aeetes. He had help though. Medea, the daughter of the king, was made to fall in love with him by Aphrodite. She gave him a salve which protected him against the monsters he had to face, and the next morning he had to face quite a monster. The next morning he had to yoke fire-breathing bulls with hooves of bronze. What did he have to do once he yoked them? He had to plow a field and plant it with dragon's teeth. What grows out of the ground when you plant dragon's teeth? Why, soldiers, of course. And once he planted the field with dragon's teeth, Medea advised him to defeat them by throwing a stone at one of them and pretending that it was another one of the soldiers who had done it. The soldiers had soon killed each other. She then gave him a sleeping potion to drug the dragon who protected the Golden Fleece. Having captured the fleece, Jason married Medea and snuck off with her by night. When her father heard of this, he died of rage. In other versions, he actually dies of old age, but it's better this way. On the way back, they were chased by the admiral of Colchis, who had been promised Medea's hand in marriage. In order to slow him down, they cut up Medea's little brother into pieces and threw him over the side of the ship. Because the ancients were so concerned with the burial, they couldn't just leave him floating in the water, could they? When they got to Iolcus, Medea found out that Peleus wanted to have Jason murdered upon his return. In order to get around this, Medea went to the palace and convinced Peleus that she could make him young again. In order to do this, she cut up an old ram and boiled it. What she pulled out of the pot, however, was a young lamb. This convinced Peleus and his family that she had the power to make him young again, if only they would cut him up into small pieces and throw him into boiling water. So she got Peleus' daughters to cut him up. However, when they did this, he just stayed dead. They nailed the fleece up on the temple of Zeus and then sailed to Corinth when the locals were angry at what they had done. When they got to Corinth, they were taken in as refugees, and there they had 2 children. And this gets us to where our story begins. As it turns out, most of Jason's successes in life had something to do with Medea. She's more than just a helper. She's clever, brave, perhaps most importantly, willing to do just about anything for Jason. Also, she has the ability to be a doer of great deeds, if not a doer of good deeds. She is, then, the hero of this play, not only because she has god blood in her veins, but because everything she does to make things better makes things bad. She believes that she has Hecate and Themis, protector of justice and law, on her side, and she's also married to a man who believes that she should be passive in all things. Trouble's a-brewin'. Let's talk about Euripides and what he has to do with writing this play. You can see he lived a long time. He lived from 485 to 406 BCE. And he was a bit of a loner who was content to hang out in his own private library. He wrote 88 plays, perhaps as a result of the fact that he liked to hang out in his library. He was well thought of by Sophocles and after his death his plays actually achieved great fame. However, during his lifetime, he won only 4 victories at the city Dionysia. He spent the last years of his life far from Athens in the court of Macedonia, and many have said that he did this because he was bitter about his lack of success with his dramatic works. However, there's really no evidence to support this. He wrote Medea in 431, just before the outbreak of the Peloponnesian War that I mentioned when I was lecturing on Oedipus the King. Why is he worth talking about? Well, he revolutionized the stage through portrayals of strong women, and I would add to that, portrayals of characters that you wouldn't otherwise hear doing and feeling noble thoughts, who otherwise wouldn't have been doing them on stage before this. He also gives us less flattering portrayals of male heroes from ancient myth. The portrayal we get of Jason in the story is not exactly nice. He spends a great deal of time focusing on the thoughts and the motivations of his characters, too. He doesn't assume that you know why his characters are doing things. He tells you. He uses simple language. Now, I know this is a matter of opinion, but when you compare the language of his plays to that of, say, Aeschylus, or even Sophocles, you can see that it will be easier to understand for the average Joe. Finally, he revolutionizes the stage through his extensive use of the Deus Ex Machina. What's that? That's a term I used earlier, and this is a kind of crane that actually allows characters to fly on and off stage and seem to defy gravity. Well, let's get into some of the themes of the play. The most obvious ones are family, sacrifice, home, the inequality of the genders in society. Medea goes to great lengths to talk about this, and the life of a foreigner. Remember, Medea is a double minority in her society because she is both a woman and a foreigner. She'll never have citizenship status, and any children she has with Jason will not be considered legitimate in the eyes of the law because she's non-Greek. Let's listen to what she has to say about why life is so difficult for a woman. And it's interesting how Euripides in this play puts some very legitimate points into the mouth of someone who does something so horrendous. She says it's difficult for women because they must have dowry money so that they can have a marriage at all. In other words, they have to pay, or their families have to pay, so that they can get married. Once they're married, their husband is their master. It's as if they're a slave in their husband's house. She will always be a foreigner in her husband's home. That is to say, she will always be learning his customs and his ways and guessing what it is he wants next. Men can go and cheat if they get bored. Women must stay faithful. This is the double standard that society has set forth for them. And you can see this is still true in our culture to this day. Men who cheat get called players. Women get called something, well, I'll leave that to your imagination. Childbirth is extremely painful. She'd rather go to war 3 times than give birth even once. And she should know. She's given birth twice on Jason's behalf. Jason also has a couple of interesting points about why he's doing what he's doing in this play. And they seem pretty preposterous and off the wall at first. But I would like to point out that these do conform to some sort of societal norms. So let's talk about that. He can only really be a common law husband to a foreign woman. I mentioned this earlier. And their children can't look forward to any kind of citizenship. Also, if Jason wants to advance in society, he needs to marry a Corinthian woman. In so doing, he would actually be able to have... In so doing, he would actually be more financially secure and be able to send Medea money. In a way, he actually tries to spend it so that he's telling her he's doing it for her and for his kids. Preposterous, huh? But what comes next is the part that's so shocking. Medea sends a robe and a crown via her children to the woman that Jason is set to marry. And it first seems like a nice gesture until we realize that both the crown and the robe are poisoned. What is the result of this? The princess of Corinth, Jason's new fiancée, both catches on fire and melts at the same time. And when her father, the king of Corinth, also named Creon, comes into the room to help her stop, drop, and roll, the same thing happens to him. His flesh simply falls off of his body. But wait, it gets worse. In order to fully punish Jason for what he's done to her by trying to run off on her, Medea strikes at him by doing the worst thing she can think of doing. She thinks first about killing Jason, but that's not bad enough. She needs to kill her own children with him, because he knows that he loves them. And this seems crazy, because doesn't she love them too? I guess this would be easier to swallow if we thought she hated the children. But in fact, Medea loves the children quite a lot. So she murders them. She takes them inside the house and kills them with a sword. Here's Delacroix's vision of the same event. And the play is pretty harrowing here. In the play, blood seems to run from underneath the doors and drip down the stairs. So even though this is happening behind closed doors, you get the full effect of a river of blood flowing onto the stage. She gets away with it. She has an escape plan. She's talked to the king of Athens, and he's agreed to take her in. Of course, he doesn't know what it is she's about to do. He's sworn an oath by the gods to protect her, and he'll have to abide by that. So she rides a dragon chariot out of the city, and she doesn't leave the bodies for Jason to bury. She takes them with her in a final stab at him, and leaves him to ponder what he's done, and how desolate his life now is. Why does she use poison? Why does she fly off in a dragon chariot? Well, this is easy. For the ancient Greeks, a woman like Medea was obviously into magic and sorcery. She was from the East. She was from a part of the world that is now the former Soviet state of Georgia. Even her name for the Greeks would call to mind images of Persians coming from the East and invading their land. The Greeks believed that their land was full of magic, and that people from this part of the world were really good at poisoning people, rather than fighting them out in the open, like Greeks. And we'll see that these kinds of prejudices against Easterners will work against the Greeks when the Romans invade them. Still, what kind of hero is Medea if she is the hero of this tragedy? And how well does this tragedy do at living up to the terms I laid out in the previous lecture? Both she and Jason are heroes. They both have god blood in their veins. However, she is the one who brings about the doom in this play. Everything she does to make things better for herself makes things worse. Does she commit hubris? Yes. She hurts Jason to make herself feel better by killing her own children, killing his fiancée, and killing his father-in-law. Does she commit hamartia? Does she miss the mark, try to make things better, but screw everything up while doing it? Yes, you could say this. She tried to make things better by engaging in such drastic revenge. Is there peripetia, though? Yes, but not for the hero in this play, for everyone else involved with her. Other people die, other people have their children murdered, but none of this seems to affect her in the same way. Does she gain gnosis or self-knowledge? I guess earlier on in the play, when she muses on the hard life of a foreign woman in ancient Greece. Perhaps then she gains gnosis. Is there catharsis? Well, I think for us, the audience, the instant she flies away in her dragon chariot and the chorus talks to us, we know it's over and it can't get any worse. So that's when it happens. Stay tuned for my next lecture on the Bacchae.